So, I welcome you to this year International Symposium, The Art of Criticism. This year thematic is what is criticism? We are gathered today different critics, different workers from the field of literature and culture around Europe. And we will of course talk about the situation of literary criticism today and in the near future. If we maybe start with this general question, which is also the theme of this year's symposium, what is criticism? According to the general adopted definition, critique is supposed to develop from a critical attitude towards the world. It exists in relation to something. It exists also as a mean to tell the truth. Today we know that within art, professional critique is disappearing, that instead of lucid reading and following society and thought and changes in it, it is increasingly subject to the imperative of the market, transforming itself to cultural theory in a way, and turning from cultural to economical trivial value. So I would like to ask everyone, each of you, what does criticism means to you personally in this plot of the plurality of opinion, what criticism today actually is? Who would like to start?
I can start.
Okay.
So for me, I guess my name is Larisa. Yeah, I think that for me, a critique is a piece that contains critical reflection and argumentation. I think it's a piece that tries to deal with the book, if we're talking about literary criticism, as wholesome as possible. So it shouldn't be just a synopsis, which I think it's quite common when we're reading reviews. But I think it should examine all the elements of the book, how they function together, if they function together. I think it could be a tool for readers or like a point of reference when they consume literary works. I think it should also have a significant function in upgrading or creating the literary canon. Yeah, I think it's just a way of examining and kind of building a reflection upon the production that's happening and opening up a dialogue about literature. So my point of interest is more in children's literature. So for me, I think that's even more vital in a way, just because children don't read reviews, they don't read critiques. So the adult is the one that gives the book to the child, or like if we're talking about theater as well, or in general. So I think especially for the adults that are trying to raise or educate or introduce the children with culture or with literature or with art in general, they should probably look also in this area of criticism as a tool that could help them thinking about what should they offer to the children. That's my starting point, maybe.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Nika. I completely agree with Larisa, but I would just like to maybe add, because I work as a critic and also as an author. I don't like the expression artist. And for me, as an artist, I really need the critique, the review, because it gives me honest and professional feedback, which you never get after the reading or performance when you're talking with people. There's always like a lot of politeness in those situations included. And if I don't have an honest feedback, then I cannot grow as an author. And if then nobody gets it, or if everybody gets it, then we can also maybe change the themes or the way we work in field of art, not only in part of review. So I think it really like needs to go hand in hand, the work in art, like the theater or the theater performance or book or art piece or whatever, together with the reviewing, because right now it's like very, it's like competitive, and you can be one of those things. So it's very counterproductive right now, like in Slovenia. I would say for sure in other countries. But yeah, and then as a part of audience or like reading population, I always take book reviews or performance reviews as a tool. You know, like what to see, what not to see, what see if there will be time, like what to prioritize. And also to see some continuity in author's work.
This is a really nice attitude from the author towards the critic you mentioned.
Well, if I may add something to what has been said, and what is quite difficult to not agree with, actually. I think it's always interesting to change the question a bit. And Ales, your question was, what is criticism according to our opinion? And I don't like the word, because it leads us always in a very unstable terrain. I would much more like to use when is criticism. This is actually a strategy already, for instance, already used in the philosophy of art, when Nelson Goodman is kind of changing the all-time question, what is art, into when is art. And as soon as he does that, we move the focus a bit more into the pragmatical, into the functional realm of focusing on a subject. So if I would have the freedom to change your question to when is criticism, then I would stress criticism happens when there's a successful mediation, and kind of mediation simultaneously with the critical thinking and kind of independent valuation of whatever is being criticized. And in the field of literature, you can kind of have criticism on a book, on a performance, on a even kind of digital literary piece. So I would like to stress, when the mediation in frame of the critical thinking is successful, then we have the criticism, because then we have both parts, like the art piece and the writer or artist, and the readership or receivership, so to speak. So I would just add this slightly shift of perspective.
And I suppose I could say something, just Andre, your comment there about what is art and when is art. That made me think, because I'm sitting here thinking, God, you know, I'm an author. I'm not a critic at all. Maybe I'm in the wrong room. And I was sort of thinking, you know, when is criticism? When is criticism for me? I mean, I've written some reviews and so on and so forth, but primarily it's something that happens in the process of writing itself, and then with editors, agents, and all of that business. But it's quite intrinsic, and I would try to sort of also I think it was Nika said that you're also an author, so it's interesting to see your dual kind of identity there, Nika. I don't think I could manage that, because thinking too much about this world of critique as an author can, for me, sometimes preoccupy you with ideas about what you should be thinking, or what opinions should you have, or what political attitudes you should have, or what subjects are the good subjects. And I don't think that that's, at least from my perspective personally, I wouldn't want to be tied to that. In a sense, I try to maintain a distance from it, but
can I respond? Or
yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can.
Of course, I don't want to be tied, to some concept or something, but I would still like to be afterwards reminded of what I missed or what I could include, because then you get new knowledge, and then you can do better in the future, And then people get to see better things in the future. They get to read better things, and then we grow as a society. I know it sounds terribly new age, and I'm a bit terrified by those words, but
Perfect. I wonder what we'll grow into.
The thing that you mentioned here, like you mentioned some really relevant things, like of course this evergreen question of the author and the critic itself, the role of the critic, and of course the situation today. Like if we go like through the historical point of view, literary criticism, if we stick with literature only, or cultural criticism, in a way sometimes is a legacy of this period of enlightenment, ideally striving for cognition, and wasn't always the mediator of reading. Of course, a lot has changed in literary criticism, as like, for example, also Ondrej will know that Czech literary critic Belicek once wrote that globally literary criticism is still in a way in a phase of transformation, which is nowadays mainly due to the media and book market changes in the period of late capitalism. This especially affects this Eastern Bloc, or like transformation from the socialism, capitalism, that we see a lot of changes in the field of cultural literary criticism. And also you pointed out this question of the critic and the author, like what is the role of a critic as a public intellectual, if it still exists? So maybe we can start with this question: who is a critic? Like, for example, if in the past we had like a critic as a public intellectual, or we also had to some certain degree critics that the whole generations, poetical generations, were gathering around. Today's situation is completely different. It is not even clear what a critic is or must be. If we point here another example of this difference from history already, let me again go to, I don't know, Czech case. The literary critic Šalda said the critic must be an artist, so a poet or a writer. And the other critic, Václav Černý, for example, stated that it should be a scientist. By your opinion, what is this ratio between academia and the personal view, considering that nowadays we have this mixing of roles due to economical situation, of course, but also these mixtures are well known from the history as well, like the role of the poet and critic mixing together in, I don't know, for example, Eliot or Bonnefoy, Gracq. Who is critic, and what would critic needs to be today in this increasingly losing identity of it, by your opinion?
Yes, maybe I can connect a bit to what Ondrej said before. I found it very, and I think it can connect to the question, what is a critic? Or who could be a critic? Because he said something, Ondrej, he said something about successful mediation, and I think this is something that of course is very important. Also, in my opinion, that it should be a mediation and not a disruption between the work of art that, or the position of the artist that is reviewed, and the people who are reading the critic or the review. And I think there is maybe a bit of a connection to the role of the critic, who I think also can be as well an artist or the author, because I think people are able to make a difference between one role or the other role they have one time or the other time. And of course, you might get some pressure if you have to share yourself for several roles. But I really think that there is this importance of going into one role where you are aware that you are looking at something else, somebody else made, and you try to find out something about. For me, I try to say it like you try to find out something about the poetic, or you try to understand the poetic that's behind the position or the work of art, and then you would try to find out whether what you can see as a critic or as being in the role of critic fulfills what you can see of this poetics that's behind it. So this is what makes it a successful kind of analysis or critic of art. And I think that's a pretty tough thing because, as we all know, because it can happen that you just cannot see the poetics or the ways that it should be fulfilled in the end. And so if you are also an artist, it could help you in seeing more, whilst on the other hand, it might bring some problems because you're not as such in such an, let me say, objective position as a critic who is a professional critic.
What are the other opinions on this? Because basically this is one of the questions each year, like this distinction between the academical approach and the style of the critic. Because there are a lot of cases that people are saying that the professional critic should exist, but in reality, we cannot actually expect it in today's neoliberal market when the payment for critic is really, really low, and most of the cultural workers are placed in different roles, from editors to authors to critics and so on. What is the opinion of others on this question?
I would just like to connect to what Daniel said about getting into the role when being a critic, because this also connects with when you are anything, author and critic, you are in some kind of frame, and I guess for me it's also important that that you maybe reflect on frame with which you enter into some work. That could be your criteria, that could be your expectations, that could be bunch of other stuff. Just this week I was watching the movie Jennifer's Body, where if you're maybe familiar with it, that I don't remember the name of the director, but the screenwriter also wrote the script for Dunaju. And this movie stars Megan Fox, who I presume you all know. And the movie, when it came out in, I think it was 2009 or 10 or 11 or something, was totally trashed because it was so like like a movie for a male gaze, and it was starring Megan Fox. An audience were expecting, her being sexy and this kind of stuff, but audience didn't get this because they got a bunch of male character that you couldn't identify with, and Megan Fox was a violent vampire that was eating boys. So, but in recent years, this movie came to be some kind of a cult hit just because of this shift of the perspective, and also because this shift occurred after the Me Too movement. The parameters for evaluating this movie were totally different. So going back to the beginning, the frame with which you enter the work and the critique of the work, I guess it's also the very important part of the critique itself.
Can I go next, or
Go.
okay? Thank you. I'll just respond to Ayash's question, and first I would like to, like, this is my personal opinion, but definitely the profession of critic is necessary, and it would be really amazing if you could live off only that, like that you get to have like permanent job somewhere, and that, like, your only focus in job is to follow up the production, the books that are coming out, and thoroughly read them and do a like prompt analysis of work. Sadly, in Slovenia currently, this is like literally impossible, or maybe there exists like 3 people who actually do that, and also have to eat and pay the rent. For me, the most important thing when it comes to critic is knowing the medium that you're reviewing. So maybe I don't know if that's what you meant with academia or style, Aliash. Whether in academia is like more like the cultural theory in a way that's like, you know, you like reading the concepts and you know when to quote Foucault or Deleuze or something like that when you're writing a review. For me, this is of secondary importance, because I think that if you mainly the critic's knowledge should be thoroughly knowledge of media that you're writing about. So, for example, if you're a poetry critic, then you should really know a lot about poetry, not just different styles, but also how it's the importance of rhythm, the importance of wordplay, and so on. And like then it goes for each genre the same. But for me, the most important, but maybe also more difficult, is to know the medium. And then, because, you know, like theory, you can like follow up on that anytime, but it's necessary to keep to have a condition, you know, like to stay in touch, to stay in shape with writing. So for that, you also need a continuity, which is very difficult actually to get, like, so that you can, you know, like do only this one thing and follow up on the things that are coming out, like not only the ones that you have to read, but also like the ones that you should.
And Andre, you raised the hand as well.
Yeah, because I'm used like these discussions are simpler with the hand raising. I would also like to reflect on the question and react a bit on what has been just said by Robert. Well, if you are quoting like this famous history critics from Czech literature, and if you put it into the perspective either or neither nor, and it's I don't know. I'm not very sure if the picture is complex. My opinion on this is that it's up to you to choose the language, to choose the rhetorics, to choose the attitude or critical strategy according to to yourself, actually, to a medium, to the reader. Who are you speaking to? You just speak a bit differently if you are writing kind of a critique on a book of poems, and if you know very surely that you are addressing a lot to the writer himself or herself, and the perspective is changing slightly if you know that you are rather writing the very same critique to the bunch of those who are interested into the contemporary poetry. So there are very pragmatic parts which are shaping the language you use, the perspective you use, the attitude, whether more artistic, more metaphorical, or more scientific and based in I don't know, some theoretical frames. If you are, I don't know, taking the frame of contemporary feminist critique, and you are reading the art piece, whatever genre it is, with this or not. So this is not like more poet, more I know, scientific approach, or more mediator to the broad public. Who it's just depending on the context of the situation and how you actually interpret the very concrete moment of writing the critique. And if you mention these big guys from the past, it brings me to the idea that we have to think also in the bigger frame. Like if you're mentioning F.X. Schroeder, this is the first half of the 20th century. Literature had absolutely different position. It was the dominant, one of the, I would say the dominant cultural channel for the broad public, for intellectuals, for actually the art that makes our identity, which is nothing special, because like the young states of the first half of the 20th century were all based in the 19th century ideology, which was kind of rooted into the in the origin of language idea, etc. So this is in a sense very banal, but we are not for many years in the situation when literature and the written text and the published text would be kind of the #1 medium for circulating contents, ideas, emotions, etc. in the society. So that is the situation where we are now. And when thinking on criticism, I would not actually like to look back into the history, because the conditions were just different, and in the big frame they were different. I would rather look to the now. And for instance, if I think of critiques of contemporary popular music, or even better of the quality TV and contemporary film, those guys now in Czech Republic are the cultural personas which are of a broad influence, which can introduce very important topics like the gender perspective. Those are people who gain really thousands of readers, and they are writing the critique as we would do in literature, as critics or as writers. It does not depend on the role, on the roles which we have. So the situation is very dependent on the hierarchy of medias channeling thoughts, emotions, etc. in the society. And I honestly, I'm after all the years really bored by the repeating of the mantra that criticism or literature have bad conditions, and this is why we struggle and why we all have to do it in the kind of hobby mode, why we can't be professional. We've heard it this thousands 1,000 times, and like repeating it is not the solution. I don't know what the solution might be, but I'm pretty sure on this. Like when we repeat it, it's not no step like further from the problem. And I would just like to remind now I'm the kind of the one who is stepping back into history, that the critiques like Czerny in the 60s, 70s, they made a very high quality criticism, and their conditions were much worse than we have, because they were prohibited, they were illegals, they had to publish underground or abroad, actually without any channel or very limited channels to their readership. So the situation in this comparison is actually not that bad.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why I actually am asking this. But we have to be honest in a way that literary criticism and criticism itself, it's like always with a step back in the past, because we went through this period of democratization to global mass amateurism in a way of writing the critiques or like texts, which are nowadays more PR. But I completely agree with you. Of course, we shouldn't be placed back in the past. That's why I'm asking, what are the conditions of the criticism in general? What is the role today in your own countries and in general in literature? Because of course these changes happened, but what did we get with them in a way? And that's why I was like asking this distinction between the professional and amateur critic, for example, and how you examine your own evaluation criteria in your own work. Because basically today time with this democratization, of course, also a lot of other situation came that we don't actually know where the role of the critic is. Is it a gatekeeper? Is it a mediator? Is it just a book blogger or like a YouTuber? And what is the evaluation criteria? Is it like necessarily standing with some kind of apparatus from academia, or it's just like the style? That's the thing that we were talking about.
So you mean like who or what gives you the relevance to put yourself, or the other people to put yourself in the means of being a reviewer or a writer of critiques?
And also just the free market that we are currently. What is the point of literary criticism? And I'm actually asking this, does criticism even exist at all? Are we talking about the past concept that doesn't exist anymore? I completely agree with you, Ondrej. But like this transformation from meta-narration into clouds of narrative and stuff like that, the authentic sense of the literary criticism that we were talking in the past from the early 20th century, of course, doesn't exist. That's why I'm asking you about your opinion. What is actually criticism today, and what is the role? And of course, what is also our personal responsibilities in this open market, if we even do have something with it? Or is it just the localized democratic reading, not any more like reviewing or critiquing, bringing the critique of like text of the play or etc.?
Well, I'd provoke and say it depends on what ambitions you do that with. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly the field that you can influence up to 100%. What you cannot influence is the position in the cultural metabolism of the whole. And what you also cannot influence is, let's say, the changing competences of those who are reading it. This is where you just can't what you just can't change. I'm afraid like the criticism remained the same in the exact variety, from very poetic to, let's say, very scientific, with the realms of more like marketing oriented or like booktubing, which might be dumb, but at the very same moment might positively influence many more people than like the book-based text criticism of the classical concepts. So
yeah, it's an interesting point, Andre. Again, I just to weigh in from some kind of a practical experience that's a little perhaps outside of the context of Central Europe. So my will be published in the United States next year, and their PR plan for that kind of places on a similar sort of level, getting it reviewed in the New York Times and having me interviewed by Instagram book reviewers, you know, as sort of different vectors for getting the book into the arena of discussion around literature.
I would add to that, when you frame it with a public relation plan, that's great. I love it. One could say that for us, like the professionals of the literary field and knowers of the traditions of the literary field, we still feel the hierarchy of criticism. You have the New York Times review, which is the highest, the best one you can have. But this hierarchy does not apply anymore in the variety of possibilities where critical thinking can be used. It's not media specific anymore because it has not to be written. It's not, let's say, the target group specific anymore because different attitudes or different uses of the critical thinking are targeting different groups of people. So we are like, there is a perhaps lack of a vector. We used to have this this writer, critic, writer, artwork, critic, reader. Now we have like splitted vectors after what happens if you have the writer and his or her, let's say, novel, and then then you go in all the directions, and in all these directions you can only have your own personal hierarchy. You can evaluate more, like having a talk with your kind of partner on Instagram, Gesprächspartner, I don't know how to say it in English.
Interviewer or interlocutor.
Yeah, exactly. Or with the well-known critic of the New York Times. It's just up to you, but the real influence on the readership, you just cannot await that the New York Times review brings a neutral, not very efficient blurb on the back of a book, while the interview on Instagram brings you, let's say, 500 readers.
Yeah, I agree, but in this way, of course, these premises are not longer about the art, aesthetic, and the politics. It's just about the production itself. And this is the question: how is do we actually agree with this status quo about criticism in a way that we went quite deeply into production? on this line of like production, reader, author, and there is no more line of like political, poetical, aesthetical, and stuff like that?
I don't agree. I don't think so. Well, if I write a review or a piece of criticism the best I can, I don't feel I'm the production field, because my habitus is to be like the deep going, analytic shit. Beg your pardon my French, and not this let's say Instagram rhetoric, because I'm not able to do that, and I would do that in a most probably very bad manner. But what I can do is this deep shit. So I'm just kind of offering this potential, and I can easily live with that, because the others do what they can. For me, like the important thing would be that the variety of attitude is present. The worst thing what can happen is silence, in a sense.
Yeah, so, and I would just add to that, if I may, that all of the elements that you mentioned, you know, poetic, aesthetic, political, and so on, will only occur actually in this space between the writer and the reader. And I suppose that all of the different forms that we're talking about here are interpretive and making these connections. And so whether that's happening, you know, again, on the New York Times or on a Bookstagram profile on Instagram, you know, there's who's to say? But I don't know if you make my point. I think that there's a danger of slipping into an assumption that it's only worthwhile if we can use a lot of complex language and references that only a small number of people will get.
Yeah, I understand that, but like the thing is, like, you know, like we are now talking about individual practices. Of course, I also prefer to write about deep shit than using Instagram language when I'm reviewing the book and etc. But the problem is that we are now talking about the whole system here, that if there is not enough funds and not a general public acceptance, of course, it will go to the amateur way, supposedly quite soon, and we already see like the situation changing. That's why I'm like trying to get this idea, also the responsibility of like keeping the professionalism in a way, if we do have to keep it. Between all this plurality of opinions, of course, it's the democratization is of course good, but it has some flaws at the same time.
I would like to go back to the production quote and say that I do actually agree with it, and I feel like I'm part of the production when I'm writing a review. I've written a lot of reviews about books that I would personally never choose. Neither would it be my priority to write about them and then publish a review, because, you know, we get, I don't know if this is because of the cultural politics in Slovenia, or is the current cultural politics already consequence of some other aspects, and I'm really not smart enough to answer this. But there is a production, you know, like, for example, you have everybody has a deadline. Publisher has a deadline, how many books per year you have to publish, so then you can apply for new open calls for next year. And then after after publishing a book, then you also critics or the authors have some time in which time they have to do this and this many, I don't know, PR events, thingies, whatever, and in how much time the review has to be published, so that it's not outdated, because after some time it's not relevant, the book is not relevant anymore, and then like everybody is just following up, so we get this minimum of funding, and the content is definitely not primary anymore. Like it's very secondary, or maybe third on the priorities of, I'm saying now this in the whole Slovenian society of the cultural politics. Because, for example, if you also look at the productions that we're seeing either in a theater or the movies or the books, there is very few pieces that are daring. This is also a consequence of the lack of the time and the funding that you have to really work on this piece, because you also have to you do a bit of other stuff in between, so you get some paycheck and do some other stuff because nobody else wants to, and it's a vicious circle. Yeah, and maybe at the end of the year we realize, oh, actually cultural sector is profitable and we do earn more than we get, but we that de facto cannot work without getting the money first. You have to have guaranteed that you will survive through the year, and then you just do what you the best you can do. For example, whenever I'm reviewing a piece, then at the end I'm really asking myself, who am I criticizing now? Whose fault is it that they had very little funding, very little time, and very little focus for this piece, which obviously is not the best. It would be a miracle if it would be very good, but then but it's not their fault actually, So who actually is the when we write negative reviews, who are we targeting? Who are we actually? Who is the object of the review? For me, I think it was the ministry or some institution that decides who gets funding and how much things you have to do in a year. But
I don't think it's just about funding. I think you can make an amazing performance with 100 euros. It's not. I don't think it's. I think that's quite daring to say. They're just trying to make. I don't think you should. That's my opinion. Put yourself in this position to. Okay, I consider as a reviewer, I consider this work as a bad, it's not quality. Why? Why? What are the excuses behind? Okay, they didn't get enough money, they didn't have enough time. That's well, you don't get a lot of money when you're writing the review. So what would that mean, that your review? That's why it's going to be bad. When you said before that the content of the review is not relevant. Of course, it's relevant. I mean, I think if we're talking about a group of people that are more dedicated towards this area of writing reviews, I think they should keep a high level, because we are still talking about, yes, like we said before, there are bloggers that are using this media in another way, but I think that this difference should be present. I think it is relevant.
I think you said something, Larisa, something important now. The thing is, I see it more at movies, of course, than at literature, because for writing something, you basically just need a computer and electricity and light and something. But with movies, you sometimes see how they work outside of their budget somehow. They don't realize the frame in which they are working, and they sometimes want more that their budget is capable of. I'm not saying that there cannot come extraordinary stuff from it. For example, if I just mention the really genius Slovenian filmmaker, which is working with practically no money, and she's making movies that look like a €1 million budget stuff with special effects and so on. But or you can also make some kind of trash hits. But yeah, it's also but I would still say that these are like extraordinary exceptions in the system. Because again, saying okay, maybe the fault is on the production side or ministry side for not granting enough money, but still there is a fault on the side of the artist or production team to not evaluate the circumstances they are working in. But of course, I mean, it's not so simple as maybe now it sounds, because of course you have works that in a way transcend their production circumstances in a bad or in a good way.
If I may just jump in, when I was saying that this lack of money in system that I'm bored with, and I don't want to hear about it anymore. It was not complete, to be honest, and exactly what we are dealing now with is touching also the historical conditions which are not present right now, because what we really need is like in all the part of the literature field, even the academia, has more time to focus and to elaborate, to like more time to have the opportunity of a column work in order to focus on like critical details, on the details as a writer, on the details as an editor, as a publisher, like everyone. And this is heavily dependent on the, let's say, economical stability of the whole sector. If whenever I hear like writers 50, 70, 100 years ago who were supreme, did not have any scholarships or whatever kind of state-funded conditions for their work, it is true on one side, but the bigger frame again, which is changing the perspective of this narrative, is that actually literature was somewhere else in the whole system of culture production, and that their contribution was also, if recognized, as I said before, very kind of substantially rewarded. And this is not a case right now. So in a sense, I do really well understand why Nika is mentioning also the kind of pragmatic conditions which she empathically kind of reflects when writing. I don't have a clear kind of point or a solution or a nice quotation like ending of my commentary, but I just wanted to make aware of this fact that actually, like, being in a economical underpressing, this is lowering down the quality time which you need for good production. It's not essential always, but in the big frame, it's crucial, of course.
These are also like 2 points that I would like to ask you on, especially the system and of course the distribution of the power, because as Ondrej and others said, we are living in a completely different time. If we go back from the past, we are surrounded with hyper-production. The literature is not in the same position in the society as it was in the past, but we are now basically surrounded with this echo. What is not capable of self-financing does not deserve to live, in a way, sometimes even. And let's be completely honest, in most cases, criticism cultural criticism, literature criticism today in art lives only because of the public funds. There are, of course, some other examples, especially in the young sector. We saw also in Slovenia, in Czech Republic, and elsewhere, some initiatives of groups that were like re-questioning the art. But here I'm asking the system itself, when we were talking about these changes and this liberal free market, does the system even needs to support us in a way? And other thing is also, what are the responsibility in the system itself then? Because in a way, we still, even from the past, we do have some form of power. For example, let's not forget also, for example, Daniel, you mentioned as well, the critic being in form of power, like with foreigner literature, for example, it's always like gatekeeper, what literature is going out of the country. Critics are usually sitting in the commissions of spending public funds and stuff like that. We still have some power, but the thing is like, how is the system itself should be organized? And also, what reflection should we do on ourselves?
I have seen in the last few years, I had an interesting perspective, maybe because I was working in an institution in Vienna, Alte Schmiede, where I was curating the literature, the readings program, like three days a week with readings. And I have to say, for my orientation and what I have seen, how colleagues from other literature houses in Austria oriented themselves for their programming, what they not yet knew about positions of authors in Austria and Germany, who mostly we were inviting, sometimes also from Slovenia or from somewhere else abroad, of course, but mainly from Austria, because this is what we were funded for. I can say that two things that might be interesting. One thing is that even when looking into the longer past, this institution was founded in 1975. You could see that there was not a big change in the audience, how many people came to readings. I also had the impression that the audience was not orientated at all by this kind of fast media like Twitter or maybe YouTube or this kind of blogs or so. So it was more orientated through classical critics in written media, I think, as far as I got it. And that was also the case for me, of course, when orientating myself for the programming work. And I also have seen the colleagues in the other literature houses acting like this. And I have to say that also that it's not so easy to talk about where funding starts, because part of the income of the critics is also generated by what the literature houses are able to pay them for moderations for readings sometimes, so I got the impression it is important that there is funding, because it gives the economical basis aside from neoliberalism for these kind of critics who take their time and who can combine, for example, if they very often there's a combination of being paid for giving an introduction and for moderation for reading, and the time you spend you can also use for then writing a thorough critic. Of course, you might know, but I think this is a very important thing. And of course, these people are gatekeepers in a way, but I have to say, I have the impression in Australia the situation is quite good, and that there are many people who are quite aware of their power, and they use it in a good way, so to say. Aside from maybe some, that's maybe I can just, you ask yourself maybe why is the title of my is criticism and solidarity. There's one medium where there is the approach for criticism is very much to really to criticize, to I don't know this word in English, verriss, maybe somebody knows. Like a bad critic, not having much of a basis, and sometimes just having wrong arguments, which I always found to be really problematic. But I also think now that these people who are really interested in literature, they know about it, they see it, and so they also know a bit how to read it.
Yeah, because why I'm asking this is actually in the previous editions of the symposium, how Robert went out, we have to add him in again, sorry. In the previous editions of the symposiums, I was talking with a lot of critics, and there were mixed opinions, of course, on this government support, because some are seeing it as also a form of surveillance, or like the act of power, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what we can basically see in the situation in Hungary. What are the critics facing there? Basically, government is giving much more funds to the media that are in favor. And it goes to literature and theater as well. On the other hand, of course, there is also this question of this moral dilemma, or like the power in our own hands. And it goes back again on the open market. If the professional critic is like the one that is also the gatekeeper, the builder of the canon, the builder of not just the aesthetical points of literature or art, but also political changes. On the other hand, in the open market, we have many others, like plurality of the opinions. And this is why I'm asking, because the opinions are really different when it comes to the system itself, how it should be representing the literary criticism or art criticism in general. And also there are many different opinions about the art system itself as well, because we all know that the system in a system is also a huge problem, because it's not reflecting the current conditions. It's also not adapting to the new media and stuff like that. We have to be completely, if I go from Slovenian point of view, we have to be completely honest. We still precious much more the printed media than internet. Like we are in the situation that in the ex-Balkan nations, we are the only one with the active association of literary criticism, which doesn't have any kind of criteria who can be a critic. In the membership, there are critics with the academical background, without academical background. There are library people there. There are like book lovers and stuff. That's why I'm like asking these questions, because they're, I think, relevant also for the future, how we can actually build the system in a better way. What we can do, like in the system itself.
I think it's very important that you don't have too much power in one hand. As you mentioned, Hungary, it has to be split. And you need to have many people who have some power and to have different roles. And so you will have a debate going on, which should help. And then it's better to have some money than not to have it, actually.
If I may jump in, it's if the power and the funding which is connected to it is in only one hand, like let's say state, or in different hands, state, municipalities, independent foundations. This heavily depends on the, let's say, long-term cultural dynamics in the region or in the location in the land. You, for instance, will find a lot of foundations in Germany, which are quite a number, let's say, or in Scandinavia, which are supporting independently from the state, I don't know, publishing projects, periodicals on the internet, or printed ones. For instance, in Czech Republic, which might also be a connection with the fact that we are the Eastern Bloc, or the former Eastern Bloc, there's only one hand which you can have the money from the independent for the independent arts, including criticism of all the art fields, and that is the state. So what we have to do is kind of periodically remind the state representatives that they are not, on one hand, the owners of the power and the funding and the money, and that this money, which goes into the kind of independent culture, which still remains independent even though supported mostly from the state money, that this has the very similar function like why we have parks in the city, which is not generating any kind of profit, but it's part of the quality life biosphere, so to speak. So that was one of the attitudes. The biggest kind of tries of cutting down the budget for the independent culture exclusive film, it was for the rest of the field, was 2012, and it brought a kind of big protests at the Ministry of Culture, which were very successful, and one minister retreated, and since then we have a let's say quite a 8 years tradition of mutual relations between the state, represented by the Ministry of Culture, and representatives of the independent field, and everyone in the independent field is aware of the fact that we have to keep the communication, that it's important, that it is important to get in touch with the new minister of culture as soon as he gets into the office, in order to inform him what is the situation for the living arts or living culture, as we used to call it. So it's heavily dependent in a situation where we are, for instance, and I think a lot of states from the Eastern Bloc are as well, is dependent on the communication. And the biggest risk which we see that is happening in Hungary right now, or in Poland right now, is the moment when the state actually grabs the aesthetics, and how should I put it? It's most probably a better word for it, but it grabs the aesthetics. It's not only processing the general money and the general power, but it grabs via some ideological platform the aesthetics as well, and it actually starts what looks like no hurting of democracy, but in a real sense it's the economical censorship, which is for me since 2012 a very important term, which describes exactly what happened or what is happening in Hungary, what they tried to make happen in Czech Republic 2012, what is happening in Poland right now and elsewhere. And the principle is simple: we just support only those things which are which are sympathetic to our understanding of the right aesthetics, right ideology. So they actually, as soon as the support of the affirmative part of the field is there, then we have the economical censorship and not the biodiversity. So that what we from the Eastern Europe have to be really, really aware of, because the only hand which here is the state. So
can I think there is one factor that is centralization, actually. There's one thing which I find quite good in Austria is, even though I don't find that our actual government is a good one, but you have like different instances who are governed by different parties at the same time, almost throughout the history and the last decades at least, and you would have different hands giving money, like the state, like the smaller how would you call that, like the countries, or like the cities. So there's at least these three kind of layers where you get funding from, and so if you have like a special situation in the government of the state, you'd have different possibilities to get funding from different from one of the lower layers, so to say, and this is kind of as far as I get it, a good idea, because it will help people who are also in aesthetics in a kind of opposition to still have the possibility for fundings. And I think, I don't know if this is possible. I think it is one thing politics has to establish, but in a way it would be possible to try to bring politicians to ideas to establish it like this.
So in a way, we all agree that public funds should be available for critical minds. But again, in a way, we come back to the first questions that we started with. Who is entitled to these funds? Is it the professional critics, or like bloggers in a literature sense of way, or like the people with the academical background, the critical thinkers, or basically the plurality of opinions? And who, of course, is in this hierarchy of the system the one who should make these rules?
that is a damn good question. If I may start like with the first idea, which might not be all right, I would say plurality of media is important right now. That is in a way connected with the non-hierarchical landscape of the criticism today. So there shouldn't, I would say there should not be obligations against like criticism in format of booktubing as soon as it is good. The problem is, well, obvious. What is good then? And I would suggest another very soft term, which does not solve the problem at all, but which might bring us in a positive perspective, and that is kind of a consensus on, if we can somehow grab the consensus of critics of different art on what is good in different media, then it is obvious what might get good support also from the public funding. To be a bit more detailed, we have a kind of big literature prize in different categories in Czech Republic. It is called Magnesia Litera, and you can receive a literary prize for prose, for poetry, when you kind of new with a book of any genre on the field, for a publishing project. And recently, like let's say 4 or 5 years, there's also a Magnesia Litera for literature blogging. So the blog itself has to have a literature quality, and it's not depending on if the blog is reflecting on literature, but if the language itself is a good quality discourse, I would say. And if it has, let's say, no, that was a wrong description. But if itself the rhetorics has a literary quality, if it's amusing also as a good literature. And since then, it is also possible for blogs which have a collective, how should I put it, which a collective stands behind, to apply for public granting at the Ministry of Culture. It somehow this prize, which is not led by a few people, but you have a commissions there, and really kind of almost everyone who is professional in the field is somehow gathering during his years of being on the field into some part of this Magnesia Litera, because it's big. So these people, without naming it, made a consensus on the fact that there's a special, a very actual, a new quality of literary expressing, which we have to be aware of. And this went from this actually independent field also into the institutional level. And that is fine. I think that is a kind of consensus without like being said and being defined, but being made. So that's what I made offer as an idea.
Yeah, I think this consensus, this like personal viewing of the whole situation, if I may add my own viewing, of course, this consensus is necessary. I think, but as you were saying, of course, this literature prize is given away with a jury who is made of professionals. Of course, they're reviewing also amateur production and stuff like that. But this is this consensus that we were also like talking in the beginning of our conversations, professional versus amateur, academia versus open market and stuff on. I think like in this situation, of course, it's also our responsibility as a field of criticism that we adapt on the new conditions. And since we are already talking almost for 1 hour, let's try to conclude on the positive note. And of course, I have to ask you for your view of the future on the criticism, which should be responsible for the public opinion, for bringing the creative and critical thinking on the masses. But as we were talking for the whole hour, also adapt on the new conditions, that we are not in a dusty academical spaces of the 19th century. So for the last question, I would like to ask you for some, as Ondrej already mentioned, I would also ask others, what do they see as the biggest obstacles in today's time with criticism, and how can we get out of this ivory tower in a way that we can possibly bring some social changes, but also changes for better in our own field. And usually every year there is a silence on this question, of course. That is also the reason why I was stressing out so much the changing of the system in the system itself.
I think
And I was mentioning the status quo.
I think one of the biggest threats for literary criticism, maybe art criticism in general, in seeing it from Vienna, from Austria, is that I have signals that there are some of the feuilletons of the bigger newspapers are likely to disappear in the next years, which really would be a major problem, because many of the good professional critics or of the persons who are also doing criticism professionally, they have a strong basis through these feuilletons, and I don't know what will happen, if there will be a substitute in the digital or not. That's a problem, I think.
If I may comment and continue with a question. The situation in my country is already the fact that we have no literary columnist on a regular basis in the what was it called in English? In the print newspaper. So we are behind or beyond this threshold, which you, Daniel, made just comment on. But we have a strong, I think, stable keep in the realm of literary periodicals, which have state funding, and I think they'll continue to have the state funding, and they are kind of they are keeping the platform for the advanced criticism, so to speak, which is influencing the newcomers from different media, etc. But what I'm kind of awaiting, what I do await after the Corona crisis is a much bigger pressure from the book marketing, that the lack of the money in the system will be even more visible, even more stronger, and the urge to sell more and to make money on it would be very, very visible in a lot of levels. Also in books which are going to be published or not, in critiques and the orientation on the target readership or target receivership, so to speak. So this is the creativity of the evil I am curious on.
I would, yeah.
No,
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. First, I would like to say that I would be very much thrilled if the critic were to, criticism were to upgrade itself in a sense of a new forms. Last year at the symposium of the critics for theater critics, it was actually on this theme, how to the new forms in critics, and there are like several very good actually and still professional ideas how to not be so rusty. For example, like with online mediums, which has a lot of perks, but for example, it might be collective writing, or maybe it can be, I know we have, I think that this is like the biggest obstacle that we have is this fondness of the written word in print, and everything that is online is like a bit lower, has lower status. And I think that if we somehow manage to ignore or overcome this and start to think as an online platforms as not comparing them to be better or worse, but to has its perks that printed medium doesn't, then maybe I think this could be one of the steps how we could, I don't know, get some vidnost.
Visibility.
I don't know how to visibility. Thank you, visibility. How to be more visible. It can also reach more people. In every sense, it's more. Yeah. In any sense, it can reach more people. So maybe this is like my wish. One of the many, but like the one that can actually be done. You know.
What do you, Robert and Larisa, think? This is the thing why I'm so curious about possible changes, because if we are completely honest, one of the big changes in the criticism field is also much younger people. Like basically most of the critics today are between the age of 20, 45. Of course, this is due to lack of finances. Critics are not paid enough. But on the other hand, it's quite strange that the younger generation is still in some way not really changing the things. As Nika said, like, for example, the system in a system still prefers the printed media. And we know this also with the awards and all the commissions and how to get the public funds. You always have to have the proofs of like the project in the printed media. You get less points if you're mentioned in the internet media and so on.
But I think that the reason, like you mentioned, that there's a lot of young people writing reviews, I think it was the same for our generation. Like, if you remember, we were actually classmates with Talia. It was one of our first possible options to enter the literary scene. It was like you would try to somehow come through writing reviews and maybe then think about other options that you have. So I think that students, that's my feeling, are still doing the same path. They are, I don't know, studying comparative literature or Slovene language, and then they kind of start through writing reviews. But yeah, like for the future of it, I think I would agree with Nika. I think it will move more or less towards the online thing. I think that Corona will, of course, like also Andre was mentioning, it will, a lot of publications and newspapers and stuff like that will have problems keeping alive, so things will move towards the online version. And I think that also blogging, for sure. I know that some bloggers take commissions the publishing houses for the reviews that they write, so like also Andre said, and the publishing houses will have this urge to put the voice about their books out there, so they will be willing to pay the bloggers to write about their books. I think I'm not too optimistic actually about the future of the literary reviewer or literary critique in general. I think it will kind of become even more pluralized. It will get shattered all over the place. And I think that on next symposiums that will happen, you will start to talk about how it will slowly just disappear through all those channels and mediums. That's my input.
This is also the thing that I was trying to, in a way, question you. As Larisa said, like in Slovenian case, most of the critics, especially in the literature field, as students of comparative literature, even though, like, for example, we didn't touch the interesting subject how to actually bring more interactive and new approaches to study literature in high schools and primary schools that Larisa was writing in her essay that you can later see on the symposium. But what I was saying here, the thing is also, and I stressed it many times, that we are all coming from different fields, but like in the literature, as Larisa said, we just got this title of literary critic when we were students, and then we were working for a couple of years and we got the title. And there is no systematical criteria who is a critic or what the critic should be by our Slovenian standards. And yeah, it's becoming a bit of a niche thing if we will not develop the new possibilities and future. And also the concurrence is really high, because as it was mentioned before, we're competing with many others. Firstly, with the younger generation, what happened in the literary criticism field is also much lower honorariums. You're easily replaceable, because of course there is no critical persona anymore, except in Slovenian case, maybe Matej Bogataj, one of the surviving dinosaurs of literary criticism in a way. And another thing is also, as we were stressing, the system itself. Like I was the last year and 2 years ago, we were talking this on symposium, and there is no clear answers how to actually do any types of criteria. I remember one of Slovene critic, today Miserko, actually said a couple of years ago that we should have a codex in a way of like that journalism is having. What can be a critic? Who can be a critic? That we lower the field in a way, and we establish the difference between a critical opinion and the reading opinion itself.
I'm actually very in favor of this idea of codex. So if there will be like a petition and we get enough signatures, so it can implement some, I don't know, not really law, but like what's lower than law? Odlok, I don't know, like some official something, then I think I'm very pro to this. I'm very in favor of this idea, because we actually do not have any standards, you know, because there is different criteria per maybe also individual what the critic or who the critic is. So then as a collective, as the whole field, it's even harder to debate or to find some points that you should, like, you know, check off the checklist if you want to be critic.
Maybe this means we need stronger editorial politics, and because this is basically the first and the last filter for critics to be published or not. And of course, I mean, we probably all have this experience that because of the whole situation that sometimes it happens that you don't really get some feedback because of, I mean, the reasons can be various, can be many, and this is somehow the first, let's say, battlefront for I don't know, for quality critiques to be published, and I guess this is gonna be more and more important because wanting or not, I mean, I'm mostly reading critiques on the internet, and that the problem is that, like, on the literary portals, of course, they maybe still seem for the editors as something which is not so elite as the magazine. Also, the payment is smaller, but the range that these critics get is actually bigger. So I guess this should be the point where this is starting. And I would just like to add that maybe literary criticism on the internet is comparing to film criticism not in such a bad position, because it's year 2020, and in Slovenia we still don't have a web page that would be exclusively for cinema, for movies, which is a problem because it doesn't generate this day-to-day reflection in a way. We have two magazines. One magazine for movies, it's out like times a year. The other, Ekran, I think 5 or 6 times or something like that. But in the meantime, a lot of stuff happens that need reflection. And you get new Slovenian movies, you get new Slovenian series, and you Google for it, and there's no place for you to read something about.
Yeah, actually, now that you've mentioned this, Robert, I think that literary criticism in Slovenia has by far the best conditions, which is very sad, since we just last hour spoke about how terrible those conditions are. But you have the most printed and online media, the most continuity, and the most people engaged. So actually, it's the only critic that still has some reputation or some, like some value. But still a lot of things needs to change, and there's still a lot of room for improvement also in that field, because in theater there actually is one online platform which exists for now a bit less than 2 years. So, and that's also it. And it was also made because of the funding from some other ministry that is not Ministry for Culture. Yeah.
So maybe this is also a specific, again, from the past, that literature was in a way the identification situation for Slovenia, as also Luke was writing in his essay. But of course, you're all coming to the symposium from different fields of criticism. And I think we all share this opinion that things have to change to better, and also that we have to structurally think how we can also begin these changes, not only out of the system, like government help and stuff like that, but also how to begin these changes in our own structures. So, for the end, if anyone has any other questions, comment, end note, he or she is welcome to do so. If not, then I would like to thank you to join this year's debate. We discussed quite a lot, everything from the past to the transformation to the present time, everything from the professionalism to amateurism, and our own national situations and the global situation on the global market. As always, we are in agreement that things have to change. I also hope that we will soon meet in live discussion, because of course limitation over, like, it's huge over the Zoom. We cannot like really stress our opinions and comments on the live debate. So I'm really sorry that this year's symposium is organized virtually, but there is no other possible way. But still, as one of the great thinkers and critical thinkers, each coming from your own country, it would be really nice to meet you soon in Slovenia. And of course, the Slovenes already, like, who are here, I will meet you soon when this lockdown ends.
I'm actually excited for Friday. I think this is the most exotic thing that happened to me this year. I can't wait, really.
Yeah,
we can leave our villages.
The foreigners don't know, but we will have another round discussion on Friday, just on the theme of different fields of Slovene literary, different fields of Slovene criticism. So everything from movie, theater to literature. And also we will talk about the conditions that Slovene criticism is currently in, with all these political changes and everything else. But yeah, that's it for today. I would like to thank you, and I hope that the situation with Corona in your own countries will soon calm down, and that we will soon have a glass of wine, because symposium is actually, the term of symposium should include wine, and I cannot offer you anything now.
You're a bad host, Aleš, very bad host.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And,
Thank